The stunning photographs collected here capture some of the most breathtaking images not found in history books. Some of these photos are from the 19th century, but if you look closely, you'll notice that the colorization captures more than you might expect. So let's have a look at the 40 vintage photos that show way too much without any further ado. Before the days of the Fast and the Furious, drag racing was a popular sport and hobby in the 1970s. The lovely women graced the races in their skimpy shorts and incredibly tight shirts stood out the most. One such drag racing queen was known as Jungle Pam Hardy, all because she was the sidekick of one of the most popular drag racers, Jungle Jim Lieberman. RAQUEL Welch was named Most Desired Woman of the Decade by the risque magazine Playboy back in the day. It's easy to see why she was bestowed such a prestigious honor. She was invited to appear on Dick Cavett talk show, where she demonstrated her grit and dedication to her work, proving that she was more than just a pretty face on a beautiful body. Lynda Carter will be remembered as the first Wonder Woman portraying Amazon Diana Prince, but many people don't realize that before she landed this historic role, she was crowned Miss World USA in 1972, just before she decided to study acting. The lady in the photograph is actress Pat Priest, the second person to play MARILYN Munster. While she isn't frightening or grotesque, she was considered a freak on the TV show. Of course, that was the show's irony, and that's why fans loved it so much. People saw leggy and bodacious blondes on their TV screens every week. The Swedish-born actress, for whom every boy in his 60s and 70s was grateful, just didn't seem to care. Not only was she the girl willing to show off her very ample assets, but she was also always ready to play the sexy vixen in the teeny-tiny miniskirt, knee-high boots, and tight sweater dress, and smile while doing so. Natalie Wood was another surprise that people couldn't get enough of. She was a child actress who received 3 Academy Award nominations by 25. While she became famous for her acting abilities and beauty, more of her fame stemmed from her untimely and strange deaths. Farrah Fawcett was not only the Rachel of her generation, with everyone wanting to have her hairstyle, but she was also the sex symbol of her generation. She was not only the all-around golden girl of the 1970s. She also had the perfect mane everyone wanted and copied, with all her gorgeous feathery locks. And despite her work as an actress, her hair is likely to be the one thing we will remember her for. In case you didn't notice, that's Helen Mirren posing seductively for this vintage photograph, before becoming the world-renowned Shakespearean actress she is today. Mirren was a young girl trying to make it in the theatrical world in 1967. While it may be more difficult to imagine her in roles other than dignified English queens, she was a vixen who didn't mind flaunting her nakedness in many films, including the notorious Caligula. While seeing a woman dressed in intimate lingerie is completely normal nowadays, it was still taboo in the 1970s. But when Suzanne Pleshette chose to model in a barely there bodysuit, at 42, she impressed and surprised everyone who saw the shoot. Susan Sarandon was the woman of the hour before Jennifer Lopez and Angelina Jolie. She was photographed casually cool, while topless and barely covered, in a blazer while filming one of her more well-known films, Bill Durham, in 1988. Many people will argue about who they believe was the first supermodel, but most will agree that CHERYL TIEGS deserves the title. She was asked to pose for a plethora of swimsuit shoots, many of which landed her on the cover of or inside the swimsuit edition of the popular sports magazine, amongst others. Although seeing a nip slip or even full nudity, hello Kardashians, is no longer shocking, it was not the norm back then, but that didn't stop Linda Ronstadt from posing for the cover of her 1976 album Hasten Down the Wind, wearing a white see-through nightgown that made people wonder how cold it was that night. Jessica Simpson appears to have had some big shoes to fill when she took on the role of Daisy Duke in the TV show The Dukes of Hazzard. But unlike Catherine Bach, who played the original Daisy Duke, we don't recall seeing Simpson in an almost non-existent striped crop top and the infamous jean shorts. Christopher Walken, one of the best actors of all time, has appeared in such epic films as Pulp Fiction, True Romance, and King of New York, proving that he can indeed play any role. Whether you're a Star Wars or Star Trek fan, you probably are familiar with these outer space television shows that once aired on everyone's television screens. If you're wondering what you're looking at, it's a photograph of Colonel Harlan David Sanders, the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken, and rocker Alice Cooper. While there are many male rock stars to choose from to fill the airwaves with their electric guitars and fabulous voices, JOAN Jett was one of the few female rock stars to make a name for herself. In a world of nearly 8 billion people, people can get away with using only one name. Cher not only sets the standard for being one of these people, everyone knows who she is. This photograph shows Rick Wright, David Gilmour, and Roger Waters performing at a concert in San Diego in 1970, with only Nick Mason missing. Floyd was one of those bands that created music that was so transcendent that it put you in a trance. Jamie Lee Curtis may be a children's book author with a short crop of white hair these days, but she used to be a movie screen vixen. Curtis has played different roles throughout her career, but some of her best were in Halloween, A Fish Called Wanda, and Trading Places. One look at this photo and you'll notice two legends, George Harrison and Bob Marley, acknowledging each other. Both men had such profound effects on the world that despite their deaths, they remain two of the most influential musicians who ever lived. The Jacksons are another musical family that has experienced extreme highs and lows. They produced the group the Jackson 5, and the youngest member became the biggest pop star of the 1980s. We won't blame you if you don't recognize the teeny bopper riding this bike. It's billionaire genius Bill Gates. Before becoming the computer wizard, he was just another ordinary kid riding his bike. Who knew that was in his brilliant mind as he was biking around the neighborhood? Even if you knew who they were, you would never guess that was the same group of guys. The Judas Priest that the world came to know and love was a group of black leather-clad, heavy metal blaring Englishmen whose music was so loud that you could seriously lose your hearing while listening to them. You might not recognize him right away, but this adorable young man is none other than Kurt Cobain. Cobain is known as the King of Grunge. We saw George Harrison enjoying his time with Bob Marley. It appears he also enjoyed his time in India. We can see from this photo that Harrison popularized selfies much before. The South is known to have warm climates and eternal summer, but it can freeze as the Northeast and Midwest. Frozen rivers like this were a vital part of the ice trade. Earlier, people used freezers to make their ice. They had to buy chunks of ice cut from a frozen lake. Munch believed that his depression, anxiety, and his drinking led to his death. He spent 6 months in a facility where he dieted and received nerve electrification therapy. Walt Disney had no idea what kind of cultural contribution he was making when he created Mickey Mouse in 1928. There was no way of knowing that by simply producing Steamboat, he changed the landscape of animation and filmmaking and laid the groundwork for a new type of entertainment that would be beloved nearly 100 years later. During World War II, Americans of Japanese descent were removed from their homes and relocated to relocation centers across the West. Major centers were in California, and each was like its own little town, complete with schools, post offices, places to work, and farmland, where people were allowed to grow their food. She was a schoolgirl when German forces occupied the Netherlands in 1941. The military forced her to drop out of public school and enroll in a Jewish-only program. The Frank family went into hiding behind Otto Frank's food business less than a year. During the peak of the civil rights movement, Cecil J. Williams was a young photographer who traveled to the South to capture this historic movement live. Poppy Northcutt was only 25 years old when she joined NASA's control room in 1965 as the Gemini program transitioned to the Apollo program. She was the only woman on the mission control floor at the time, which didn't bother her while she was helping to send a man to the moon. Here is another collection of vintage photos that can jaw-drop and show way too much. Elizabeth Scott, born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, dropped the E from the front of her name when she moved to New York City at age 17. She quickly found work on Broadway and spent 18 months touring with a Helipop and roadshow. Rozeska Godchevska was just a child when she was in charge of caring for people in pain during World War II as the youngest nurse during the Warsaw Uprising of 1944. James Hyde, a Spitfire pilot from San Juan, Trinidad, fought for the Allies in World War II. When he arrived in England for training in 1942, he formed a bond with his squadron's mascot, Dingo, a very furry little doggo who was more than a pal. He was a companion in difficult times. This photo is more than just a photograph of the first president taken in March 1843. It is the first photograph of a president. Ruth Bader Ginsburg got appointed to the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. She became a Supreme Court justice. World War I was the most bloody and destructive conflict in history. Heinous violence and horrors were only surpassed decades later by World War II. This photograph demonstrates how many lives were lost and how common it was for families to lose their fathers on the battlefield. This photo colorization depicts what it was like to go night fishing in Hawaii before it became an official state of the Union. Hawaiians used spears to catch fish in the shallow parts of the ocean or along the more rocky terrain at the time. That's all for now. I hope you enjoy watching this video. For more exciting content, please like and comment below to let us know what you'd like to see. Subscribe to the channel for more such content, and we'll see you next.